Previously, when writing R code, we saw how to create a script. And so as a reminder, a script is basically a text file where we can save all of our code. And that way, once it's saved, we could always open it back up, rerun that file, and get all of the output that we need. So here I've got RStudio open and I just have a little example R script here. We've seen this data set before. This is the state data set, and you'll notice I've written just a little bit of code to explore that data set. Now, typically when I'm doing some type of analysis and I'm writing code for myself, I almost always write that code in a script. And that's because that's for my use. I'm not typically going to be sharing that, and if I do share it with anyone, it's going to be someone else that's comfortable with writing R code and knows how to run it. But there are other times that I want to be able to share not only the R code, but also the output from that code. And in particular, I want to share that with a collaborator. So this will typically be someone that isn't going to go in and write their own R code. They're mainly interested in the results that we see from the data set. So in other words, I need to write some kind of statistical report that I could share with a collaborator. Now, if I'm going to do that, I really don't want to share the script. Usually what I want to do is I want to share what's called an R notebook. And so R notebooks are a great way that you can integrate text as well as code and output from that code. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how to create an R script. Now, before we do that though, I do want to just show you an example of what an R script looks like. So this R script here, this is something that I wrote in RStudio. This is actually a draft for a workshop that I'm going to present later this year. And in this workshop, I'm going to show people how to code. And so you'll notice in this document that I've got a bunch of text. And if I scroll down, and again, remember this is a draft, there's going to be some errors in it. But if you'll notice, I can embed code in a really nice way. And I can do things also where I have code and then the output from the code and then output from the code, and then again more text. So this is again a really nice way that I can integrate both, text that I want someone to read, code, and the output from code. And I'm going to show you how to create one of these. Alright, so in RStudio, we're going to go up here and we're going to click on New File that we want to create. And previously, we just created R scripts. This time we're going to create an R notebook. Now, when you first create an R notebook, it's going to have some default text in here. And essentially what this default text is it is just telling you how to write in an R notebook and how to create the different parts. And so it has a little tutorial that is always going to be built in. And again, this is going to appear every single time you create a new R notebook. And so at the very top, it will have a title. So this is our notebook. I'm going to call, just for this video, I'm going to call this example R notebook. And you'll notice that the output is an HTML notebook. What this is going to do is the file that it creates is going to be an HTML file. And that example that I just showed you, that was also an HTML file. Now, you can also convert these over to Word documents and to PDFs. PDFs are a little bit more difficult. They do require some additional software on your computer, so just keep that in mind. But for this course, we're going to primarily be just creating HTML notebooks. Now, before I make any other changes, I want to show you how you convert this file over to the HTML file. So to do that, the first thing you have to do is to save the file. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to click on Save As. I'm going to navigate to where on my computer I would like this file to be. I want it to be in here, and I'm just going to call this example notebook. All right, now that I have the file saved, the next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to do what is called knitting it. Okay, and so knitting is what is going to take this file and change it into an HTML file. So to do that, we could click here where it says Preview Notebook, and notice that one of the options is Knit to HTML. So I'm going to click this. It's going to render, and then you'll notice that a new file, or a new window appears, and this is the example R notebook. All of the pieces that are contained here are from the example that's already in here. So let's kind of compare these piece by piece. So notice at the beginning of the document we have, this is an R Markdown notebook, and it's got some text here. And notice that text appears here. We've got this little piece right here that looks like some R code, and it says plot R code cars. Ends up cars is one of those pre-built-in R data sets. So the code will appear here in kind of a gray box. And then notice the output from that code appears right below it. And then in this file we have some more text, and you'll see that that text is down here. So that is kind of the general format of an R notebook. Now, for your assignment, you're going to take an R script that you wrote in the first part where you explored a data set, and you're going to convert that into a statistical report. Now, this is going to be a very, very basic report. You know, the goal here is just to kind of play around with R notebooks and to see how to do that. So I'm going to show you how to get started here. And I'm going to do this using this example script that I have right here. So notice in this example R script, we're going to explore that state data set. So if you'll recall, the state data set is the U.S. state facts and figures, and it's related to the 50 states of the United States of America. So the first thing I'm going to do in my notebook is I'm going to give it a new title that would reflect what it is this report is going to be about. So this is going to be exploration of the U.S. state facts and figures. Now, every time I make a change in the R notebook, I'm going to highly recommend that you do this as well. I'm always going to just go ahead and knit. Knitting often, what that is going to do is it's going to save your file, but it's also going to help you troubleshoot. So you want to make small changes and then knit, and so that way if you get an error, you'll pretty much know where that error occurred in the code that you're writing. So notice the only thing I changed here was the title, and we do have that new title. Oh, and I realized I wanted to put data set after this. So again, I'm going to knit. And we see that new title there. Now, for my report, I like to use headers, so to break up the different sections of my report. And so maybe the first section that I want to have is going to be exploration of the data set. Now, to create a header, what we're going to do is we're going to use the pound sign, or sorry, and not exploration of the data set, I should say description of the data set. And what this is going to do is this is going to create a header. And to see that, we're going to click the knit button. And notice that created a nice header. Now, when you put this symbol here, make sure that you do have a space between it and the text. And so then the next thing I would want to do is type in a description of the data set. So I'm just going to put in some fake text here. And that's going to be my description of the data set. And then maybe my next section that I'm going to want to have is to read in the data set. Now I know that I don't want all this extra text here. That's kind of their example text. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that out. And I'm going to delete it out until I get to this piece right here. So this piece right here is what is going to allow me to read in code and to run code. So I don't want to do plot cars, I want the code to read in the data. Now over here in my example R script, I've already written that code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this code, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in between these two lines. Now, one of the nice things about R notebooks is they will allow you to double check your code before you actually knit the document. And so to double check that this code, everything runs, what I can do is once the code's in here, I can click on this little green arrow and it will run this current chunk. And notice that it runs just like it would as if it were in a script. Here what we did was we read about the state.x77 that appeared here in the help. Remember, the class helps me check what type of data this is, and this particular data set is stored as a matrix, but we know that we want it as a data frame, so I converted it over to a data frame and named it state.info. And often what I'll do is if I'm writing that statistical report, maybe above this, I would write something like the following code reads in the data and converts it to a data frame. It doesn't have to be, super robust, but just to let my reader know, hey, this is what this code is going to do. All right, so then the next thing I might want to do is I'm going to explore the data set. And so maybe my next section that I would want to have, I'm going to click down here, would be something like properties of the data set. And again, I've got some extra text here I don't need from the example text, and so I'm just going to delete all that out. And so maybe for properties of the data, if I go back to my script, I see that I'm just looking at the number of rows and the number of columns. So I would say something like, check the number of rows and columns in the data set, or data frame in this case. And then again, to add this in, I'm going to need to type this piece and this piece. Now, in all honesty, I'm pretty lazy, so typically what I do is I will just highlight my chunk from up above, copy it, paste it down below, and then delete out the text that's in the middle. I'm going to go back to my script. I'm going to copy this piece in. Again, I'm going to hit the little green arrow to check, make sure everything runs. And now I'm going to knit. And really, I should have knitted after this step as well. I kind of got ahead of myself, but let's knit. Now you might wonder, why did this pop up? This popped up automatically when we knitted because of that question mark in front of the dataset name, so it's going to automatically pull that up for me. But if I minimize this, I'm also going to have that new knitted document. And so notice here we've got the title, we've got my different sections, that text that I added in, we've got the code. This piece right here, what this is doing is this is just saying, hey, we went to the website and pulled up that information about the data set. We checked the class, we changed it over, and then properties of the data. And so we can keep on doing this, and we could put in some more information here. So maybe I want to explore the variable population. And so again, I could put in another header, but maybe for this time I want a subheader. I want it to be smaller. If I want to do that, I can do 2 hashtags. And so we could have exploration of the population variable. And again, I'm going to want to add in a code chunk. I'm going to delete out those middle parts. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to paste this in. Double check that it runs. Everything looks good. I'm going to knit. Again, I've got that question mark in front of there, so that's going to pop up first. But then I can look at my actual knitted document, and you'll notice here we've got the histogram, we've got the output. And so this is a very basic R notebook. Other things that you would want to put in here if this is for a collaborator. Of course, if we're going to want to put summaries into our notebook, we're going to want to write some information about it. So maybe after my histogram, I might write a summary of that histogram and what we saw, just a few sentences about that to help summarize that output. And again, so this is a very basic R notebook. And as we go through the course, you're going to get better at writing these. You're going to learn some new techniques to make them, a little bit more visually appealing. But this is a great way, again, to kind of combine written text, code, and the output from the code. So before I end this video, just a couple other things that I want to show you. So I'm going to close this out. So you might want to, add some different things to your code or change some stuff. And so something that's going to be really helpful as you move forward is if you click on the Help button and we go down, you'll notice there's one that's called Cheat Sheets. And there is an R Markdown reference guide and an R Markdown cheat sheet. Both of these are very useful. If you click on the cheat sheet, it is going to open up in a window and there's a PDF that you can download here. So if you were to click on that PDF, you would see this file right here. Now this is a lot of information. You don't need all of this right now, but this R Markdown cheat sheet, this shows you how you can do all kinds of things in R notebooks. And so, for example, if you look over here, this section right here is going to be really useful. What you've got in the left column shows you different examples of text and what that text is going to look like when you knit it. So for example, we just saw how to make headers and subheaders. So notice if you do hashtag header 1, that's going to create a header 1. If you do 2 of them in header 2, that would create header 2. So the header 1 and header 2, those are just example text. The important thing here is the hashtag. And notice the more of them you put, the smaller the text is going to get. You can add in list, italics, bolds, subscript, superscript, strike throughs, all kinds of information here about how you can do different formatting to create different things in your knitted document. One of the other things that's going to be really useful in the future is information about the code chunks. So for the code chunks, for right now, I just left everything with just an R in here. But you may want to make it to where not everything gets outputted into the R document, or maybe not everything runs. There's different reasons for that. And you can add in extra information here so that not all of the code either runs or is produced, different things like that. And so an example of this is where we've got this question mark state.x77. Maybe you want that in the document so the user can read that piece of code and say, hey, this is an option, but you don't necessarily want it to run because you don't want it always popping up that extra window. And so again, as we work on our notebooks throughout the course, you're going to learn different techniques again to make these more user-friendly and to make them look better. Now, the last thing that I do need to show you is you might say, well, after I close that window, how do I get back to that document that I created? And so this is one reason that file organization is so important in this course. And so here on my computer, you'll notice that I have the folder where I have this assignment located. And so here is that example notebook that we created it's called a .rmd file. That's the extension on it. So this file on my computer, this example notebook, that is this file right here in RStudio. Now the knitted file, or that HTML file that you would actually share with someone, that is going to be example notebook, and notice it's a Chrome HTML document. You don't want the .nb one, you just want the example notebook. And so if I go to the folder on my computer and I double click on this, notice it is going to open up that file that we created. And so this is how you would share that with someone else. This is also how you will submit this on Canvas. You're going to submit that .html file, and that's the file that you're going to submit. So as always, if you have any questions about the R notebooks or anything else in the course, please let me know.